You're listening to Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast for and by Rockies fans on Rocky Mountain Rooftop. Thank you for joining us as we discuss all things baseball and Colorado Rockies.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to another edition of Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, a proud member of the Fans First Sports Network. I'm your host, Skyler Timmons, and I don't know why this keeps happening, but we have a guest here today with us, and Evan's not here, so keep having to swap him out. Happened with Stephen Rice of the Fresno Grizzlies, happened with Paul Holden of Locked On Rockies, and now it's happening with our very good friend of the show, DNVR Rockies lead beat reporter, BBWA member, doing all kinds of stuff. He's the man of the hour, all kinds of podcasts, one of our favorite little beat reporters. It's our good buddy, Patrick Lyons.
Skyler, thanks for inviting me on today. And I should let you know, I've never seen Evan and Paul Holden in the same place at the same time. I've never seen Stephen Rice and Evan Lang in the same place at the same time. And I've never seen me in the same place at the same time. I guess that's a giveaway. Me and Evan, same person.
There you go. Just a very elaborate deepfake AI technology.
Yeah, Evan/me is awesome. Is impressive with those kind of graphic design abilities for sure.
Yeah, but we're appreciate having you on here, Patrick. We always enjoy you. Always there at the games, covering the Rockies. You're deep in the trenches, covering the game, and it was cool to kind of see you got to do a lot of the postseason coverage this season as well, covering the Diamondbacks and all that good stuff. How was that?
Yeah, thanks for asking. Thanks for noticing. It was great. It was fantastic. Truth be told, after coming back from Chicago, covering the final road series of the season for the Rockies in Chicago, doing that at Wrigley, which was fantastic. I got COVID, so I missed the final week of the regular season. Didn't get to say the goodbyes to all the players, the coaching staff, personnel, and whatnot. And so there's definitely this longingness as soon as the postseason started. And it became, well, you know what? We've got a lot of different affiliates now at All City Network, so maybe I can kind of push in a little bit with Philly and help them out. Do the same at PHNX with the Diamondbacks. Good friends with Jesse Friedman and Derek Montilla, and then it became, you know what? Maybe I'll come out for the division series, and I was able to get credentialed and everything, so that was fun watching the Diamondbacks hit 4 home runs in one inning off of Lance Lynn. And see Chase Field just absolutely packed out and rabid, and kept coming out, and it kept going on longer and longer, and it became, I felt very bad for my wife. I at least had the distraction. She, of course, just kept having to say hi and goodbye in the matter of like 36 hours as I would come home, change out my clothes and what have you, and then fly back out. But it was fantastic watching a team for a month where you didn't know if they were going to win or lose, but they had this attitude of, well, we're not going to quit. We're not going to die. Whether we deserve to be here or not is irrelevant because we're here. We're the third and final wildcard team. We won 84 games. Sure, not terribly, exciting to think about it in that capacity. But okay, now these are brand new games. This is a whole new season, and the Diamondbacks were really exciting to watch. They've got that same similar young core to the Rockies. I know Bill Schmidt said last offseason in San Diego at the winter meetings, we're following the Diamondbacks process. We're a year behind. I don't know if the Diamondbacks are a year behind, or rather the Rockies are a year behind the Diamondbacks. But even if they're 2 years behind, that's still really exciting because the Diamondbacks had a really good young core. They got a great manager there. So it was a lot of fun having a lot of skin in the game and getting to watch things from a winning perspective.
Yeah, no, that was exciting. It was cool to cool to see friends of the show and everything. Getting to do those cool things, going to playoff games and in big scenarios, be able to be in those big games, being able to cover it, which is pretty cool. And hopefully one day you can do it for the Rockies.
One day
when you're 95 years old.
1 year, 1 decade, 1 century, 1 millennia, whatever. Yes, one day.
But it's awesome. And luckily we have your expertise here as we now kind of transition to talking about the Rockies and what they've been up to so far as the stove is hot around the league. Things are happening, non-tender deadlines, Rule 5 draft protections, and some trades going around. And we joke that the Rockies usually do stuff after we record. They actually did something before we recorded this time, where they traded for Cal Quantrill from the Cleveland Guardians, right-handed pitcher, in exchange for minor league catcher Cody Huff, and they designated for assignment Tommy Doyle, also non-tendered. He's a free agent now. But what was your reaction when you saw the news first that Quantrill had been DFA'd by the Guardians? He just kind of seemed like almost a shoo-in of people like, Rocky should pick him up. What was your reaction when you saw the news that they had, in fact, traded for him?
Yeah, I thought that it was great. I thought, maybe lightning can strike twice with Bill Schmidt going back to Cleveland, acquiring a player in the offseason like he did last year with Nolan Jones for Juan Brito. And you say, okay, well, the Rockies need at least 2 starting pitchers that they can rely upon. And obviously we'll get into, some of the numbers on Cal Quantrill, but I think you can rely on him. And sure, his arbitration figure here, we don't know exactly what it is, but it'll probably be around in the ballpark of $6 million, maybe mid sixes. And I don't think you're going to get that kind of reliability or even upside, which is maybe more important for a Cal Quantrill at $6.5 million. You also have him under club control for 2025. So it's really a perfect situation to get a guy like that who, unfortunately, because of how contracts work and the arbitration system and whatnot, Cal Quantrill doesn't have a say in it. So he's forced to come to Colorado and pitch. And so I thought it was just a great move for the Rockies to kind of shore up the starting rotation just a little bit, get a big piece out of the way. I still think they might need to add one more reliable starter. Gomber and Freeland are the only 2 guys we know are locks, and hopefully between Feltner and Lambert, those could be 2 guys. Are you going to get them, for a 30 start season? That might be a lot to ask for, but I think you put a big thing on your to-do list. You check that off early on in the offseason, and he didn't have to give up much. Cody Huff, I think, is a nice catcher, but we know the Rockies have a ton of catchers right now in the pipeline, and Drew Romo's waiting to take that spot right there, and Braxton Fulford is no slouch himself. So I thought it was you're dealing from a position of strength, and you're acquiring in an area where you have a definite weakness.
Yeah, and that's kind of what I thought is there's people. It turns out there's people with opinions on Twitter and X or whatever, and no, they're viable concerns. There's the shoulder injury. No, will he be able to stay healthy? But he's not he fits the Rockies mold of pitcher. He's the exact type that they like. A sinker baller. He's not going to blow up past guys, but he induces a lot of soft contact, which that's something the Rockies are comfortable with, and it can be successful. And I think he has the repertoire, the arsenal. He gets a lot of swing and miss in 2022. A lot of chase, had a high chase percentage, upper percentiles in that. So it's nice to see a guy that's a little bit more established. Now, he seems like one of the more established pitchers that they've acquired via other means, trade or otherwise, because he's had a good track record of success over his time in the big leagues.
Yeah, if you just look at 2021 and 2022, we're talking a combined 5.7 wins above replacement, and a combined ERA there in the NL Central or AL Central, obviously a little soft, but still that's a 3.16 ERA. And those guys don't really grow on trees. You have to buy low, and obviously he had a really down year in 2023. But as you said, yeah, kind of an established guy. And flip side of the coin is like, well, why would Cleveland give up on a guy like that? And well, they're trying to cut costs themselves, and for them, having a pitcher making $6.5 million, needing to rebound a little bit, they don't have that luxury. Whereas the Rockies, they'd really be willing to, sign a guy on a 1-year, $15 million deal. That wouldn't surprise me. I don't know what pitcher that would be, but if there's a pitcher out there that is worth 1 year, $10 million, the Rockies, I think, would be interested in paying 1 year, $15 million. Again, we haven't seen anything like that ever in the history of the organization. The last time that they signed a free agent pitcher outside of the organization after Mike Hampton and Denny Nagel in that 2000 offseason was Kyle Kendrick, $5 million. So, they got players don't want to necessarily come here. Rockies don't necessarily want to overpay too much on an annual salary, as well as over the length of the contract. And so this is just a win-win. The Guardians have an area that they, unfortunately is exposed there, right? And you can kind of take advantage of that a little bit. And I think Bill Schmidt has done a good job in doing that. Does that mean they're going to play 500 ball next year. We'll have to wait. We'll find out in January. There's a certain breakfast up in Greeley. Maybe we'll find out, perhaps, over some Belgian waffles and whatnot, if they're going to be a 600 team. But regardless, you had a major hole in your starting rotation, and Bill Schmidt did a good job in at least filling one of those spots.
Yeah, it's just kind of a really low risk move, and that's how Evan described it. Kind of a low risk, high reward. If he returns to form, perfect. Like that's awesome. We have another staple in the rotation. If he doesn't, not as big of a deal. Like we didn't expend much for him, and I'm excited to see what he can do. And it was cool seeing, reading Thomas Harding's article and some of the articles that had quotes from him. I always like when the pitchers come out and say like, yeah, like I don't care about having to pitch at Coors Field. Like I'll go out and compete, which I always appreciate. Gomber did that when he first came over. I think that kind of there's that media myth. I think that gets pitchers don't want to come to Coors Field. No, I think a lot more pitchers wouldn't really care as much, maybe, as some others might.
Yeah, it's true.
Because it's a challenge to them.
Yeah, it is. And again, that's Quantrill's obviously trying to put his career back on track. So there's that challenge in and of itself. But still, Quantrill does have a little bit of experience pitching at Coors Field, coming up as a Padres prospect before that, huge Mike Clevenger deal during the 2020 pandemic season. So he has like a little bit of experience. So I think you like that. And I think the Rockies have probably, again, seen him in his younger days. And it's a really good, again, buy low candidate. And it's not that low. What makes him so low is the fact that Cleveland would have had to pay him more than they felt comfortable with. And Cleveland is a pitching factory. Like every year, they've got guys coming out of the woodwork. Some of the names you kind of know, they're bigger prospects than others. Others, are seemingly organizational guys, and they're able to get a lot out of them. So, hey, you know what? This guy's expendable. We need room on the 40-man roster. And, if we can bring back a catching prospect at the A level, so be it. And so it's kind of a win for Cleveland in a sense, for a guy that they just waived, right? They weren't really going to get much for him. They get a little something, and the Rockies bolster their rotation.
What's nice too is, one of those other articles, going back to Thomas Harding's article, where he talked about his desire to go deep into games, which was a big problem in 2023. And it worked that bullpen. And like just looking back into 2022, Quantrill had 20 out of his 32 starts, 29 of which he completed 5 innings. And in 21 of those starts, 6+ innings. So it's pretty good. You'll take that every time. You love having a pitcher that can go out there and just give you length. Ideally, 6 innings seems like the good benchmark. You can get us 6 innings, makes life a lot easier on that bullpen.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's a big win. A guy who he's still playing for contracts, and that's not to say that guys who might be a little bit older aren't going to be doing that, but they might have, again, that less of that projectability. And the Rockies, I think, will still bring in some non-roster invite guys where it's low risk, low reward, but you have to be able to rely on the starting pitching to give you some depth. I thought going into the 2023 season that the Rockies bullpen was going to be a strength, and even all things said and done, you probably look back and go, actually, yeah, it was good. The numbers might not totally back that up, but a lot of that had to do with the rotation breaking down in April and May. And it was just like, hey, let's just survive here. And that caught up, with the entire bullpen. There's really nothing they could have done about that. But now you go into the season and you have a little bit more reliability for a guy being able to go 5-6 innings and battle, kind of like how you see Kyle Freeland doing that, every single night. Gomber doing it, 3/4 of his starts. Like that has, a ton of value. And something that maybe you were going to bring up or not, it got me thinking about Cal Quantrill being from Canada. Cal Quantrill, the first Canadian member of the Colorado Rockies since
John Axford.
Oh, that's you are right there. He is a Canadian guy. Technically, I'm going to give you a dub on that because he did play in 2015, the same year as Justin Morneau. So yes,
Ooh.
How about that? So I like those connections too, right there. So that'll be one of those fun stories, come spring training of talking about Jeff Francis and him getting a little bit more attention. Obviously, anyone who listens to this podcast, the diehard Rockies fans are well aware of Jeff Francis's importance to this organization. Larry Walker, also another one of those Canadian guys. So hopefully that brings some good vibes and some good stories out of Cal Quantrill's tenure with the Colorado Rockies.
Yeah, it'd be awesome. And way I can think of this is best case scenario for Cal Quantrill has a Jason Marquis 2009 season. We just talked about him on Every Rocky Ever, and gosh, like Jason Marquis is that kind of that prototype of a pitcher that can also come and have success, and that would be good shoes to fill for Quantrill. Come in and be Jason Marquis in 2009.
Yes, I will admit I have yet to, but I will listen to the Jason edition of Every Rocky Ever, because obviously you also highlight Jason Hamill. Don't think I'm not paying attention to what you're doing over there, Skyler. You're crushing it. You are absolutely crushing it. So yeah, I like that comparison too, where Marquis, was at that point in his career where he had a little bit more veteraniness to him. And then again for Quantrill, you say he's still relatively young. I think he's going into his age 29 season next year, and he'll turn 29 in February, just before players report to camp. But his dad's a big league player too. You like that. Hasn't necessarily worked out entirely for the Toronto Blue Jays, but all the guys that they have with their fathers being big leaguers. Well, again, Cal Quantrill will have some experience and ability to rely and lean on his father for some of that advice back when he pitched during the 90s, and you had to grind it out. It wasn't 5 and dive. It wasn't 2 times through the rotation. You needed to post each and every start, and so he's got that on his little entourage and his club and his support staff. So it'll be interesting to see what he can do next year.
Yeah, I'm excited to see what he can do. I think we've been conditioned as Rockies fans. We just are grasping at straws. We're happy whenever something happens. We're like, yes,
Rockies did a thing. They did it. The thing, or a thing. Just it's more of an a thing, but still, they did a thing.
Bill Schmidt just keeps trading with the same 3 teams, but it's something.
Hey, you said it, not me.
It works.
I tell you, that's what's going to be, challenging, I think, with this offseason. It'll be helpful if Ohtani can sign before the winter meetings, as his kind of, his team has been saying a little bit, because everyone's kind of waiting on him. And I think we could be waiting with the whole Juan Soto situation and the passing of Peter Seidler. And you say, okay, they have a new interim, operating owner. So hopefully there won't be too many snags, but there's a lot of talk that it's going to be, heavy on trades this offseason because of how light the free agent market is. And so it'll be interesting to see what kind of relationships and what kind of tracks that Bill Schmidt has been laying down the last few years. We know that when he took over the job in 2021 as the interim, I'm getting my timeline screwed up. Yeah, no, it was 2021. He only traded Michael Givens there at the deadline. Nothing in 2022. I think, again, some teams can probably smell blood in the water and say, I don't want to give up as much for this guy to play hardball. And Schmidt played the hardest ball and was the only GM, and the Rockies were the only team to not make a trade at the deadline. But some tracks have been laid, and yes, there might be certain teams they do more business with than others. Atlanta, the Angels, Cincinnati Reds, Cleveland. That is all. But maybe in some of those conversations in previous years and at the GM meetings, most recently in Scottsdale, they will be able to figure out if they can, maybe move a more established piece or one of their prospects and bolster that rotation, or just, get another guy in here that, you can control for 4 or 5 more years and until that next group of guys really comes up and you have another Rockies contender.
Yeah. A lot of work to be done. But we're going to go ahead and take a quick break here, our first of the show. And when we come back, we'll continue talking about some more off-season happenings that are going around with the Rockies and around baseball. So don't go anywhere. We'll be right back. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. We're here with Patrick Lyons of DNVR. Lots of fun stuff talking about here. We just finished up talking about Cal Quantrill, and we'll touch on him really quick. But before all this, the first really big move the Rockies made was to claim left-handed pitcher Jalen Beeks from Tampa Bay Rays. They signed him to they avoided arbitration, so he is signed for the 2024 season. Left-handed reliever, part of the purge of players from Tampa Bay every year. Gets put on outright waivers, all that good stuff. Rockies snag him up. Not too shabby of a pickup, kind of a Brent Suter type of that same vibe of let's bring in this lefty and see what he can do, pair him out there in the bullpen. But What are your quick thoughts here on Jalen Beeks and joining the Rockies?
I think you hit the nail on the head. I think the Rockies maybe have the recipe now of, okay, we need a couple arms in the bullpen. Here's how we get them. Just poach the best available option, maybe off waivers. And I think you're right. Beeks will kind of fill in for that Brent Suter role. Suter, I think, had a way better track record. That was a move last offseason when it made no sense why the Brewers would have even gotten rid of him for what he was going to make in arbitration. Cal Quantrill, okay, that makes a little more sense, being in the $6 million range. But Beeks, I think, is going to fill in that role as kind of that veteran lefty. He's a little bit older, 30 years old. Again, coming off of somewhat of a down year, that's going to be a common tale. But I think it should be reliable after having Tommy John surgery in 2020, missed all of 2021. But if you look at what he was able to do out of the bullpen for Tampa in that 2020, 2019 season before he got hurt, and even in 2022 when he was a lot crisper, he's able to keep his walks down. His strikeouts are up, and in fact, if you cherry pick those numbers, from a few years back, you can actually look and say, hey, his strikeout to walk ratio is better than virtually everybody on the Rockies in the last 3 years. So, I think that's a very valuable thing to have. It's one of those numbers when you look at prospects and you say, okay, can this guy be a guy? He's lighting up the radar gun, but he keep the walks down. Strikeouts are high. I mean, that's huge. We know how much Bud Black doesn't like a free pass, the free base on balls. And so Beeks, I don't think is going to be like that. And he's another guy that's going to be playing for a free agent contract here in his final year of arbitration. So I thought that was just another good shrewd pickup. You can't agree to a free agent deal with all players and at all the different positions, partially because, again, going back to the fact that we haven't had any free agent signings yet, quite literally, right? Correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think
Really
any
minor ones.
Yeah. Okay. But ultimately, none of the guys who have earned free agency after 6 years of service time or more have become free agent or has signed a free agent deal. And so a lot of those guys will have to sign first. It's like musical chairs, right? And once there's no chairs in Atlanta's bullpen or, the Red Sox or Yankees bullpen or the Dodgers bullpen, those relievers, those second middle tier relievers and their agents are looking around going, where's there a chair? There's a chair in Denver for you. And so you have to wait a long time. I mean, look at the Brad Hand deal. I don't think that happened until March of this past year. I think Pierce Johnson was a January signing. And I think it helped that he was from Colorado a little bit. Otherwise, that could have been later on in the offseason. So this does a good job of filling up one of those bullpen spots early on in the offseason for Schmidt and the Rockies.
Yeah, it's good to. I think that's what has been nice with Bill Schmidt. And these last couple of years, he likes to try to get his priorities done early. We saw it before, even during the season, getting Herman Marquez extended. And then early here in last year, Nolan Jones was acquired early on. It's around the same time. And now they get Quantrill. Now they get Jalen Beeks pretty early. Brent Suter was acquired around this same time as well. So it's nice to see them be a little bit more busy and address some of these needs with guys like that. Well, there may be some other minor trades here and there, but it's a hard time waiting to see the dominoes start to fall in the free agent market of when they can start going after things and whatnot. But at least they're making moves and prepping the roster in different ways. And speaking of different ways of prepping the roster, Rule 5 draft protections, that's one of the first big deadlines here of the offseason, where the Rockies were able to add on a couple of guys onto that 40-man roster, some prospects. We got Adel Amador, right, middle infielder of the future, who knows him sooner rather than later, hopefully. But youngster, doing good things. Got Yanquiel Fernandez, cannon arm in the outfield. Also can hit some dingers. Angel Chevali with the from Double-A Hartford. A couple of pitchers, and Juan Mejia, all added on to the 40-man roster. Some of these were pretty easy to predict, especially with guys that have been in the system for a little while. But out of that group, anybody you're really excited about that, like the Chevalier or Juan Mejia, anybody that really stuck out to you that they added on that you're excited for?
Well, as you said, yeah, Amador and Yankel Fernandez, you knew that those guys were coming. You knew that they had to be protected. And again, there are rules obviously that go into or guidelines like, hey, you have to protect these guys or else. So you're like, hey, what about where's Zach Veen? And what about someone like a Gabriel Hughes, even though he's on Tommy John, just had Tommy John surgery, another team could pick him up. No, as you said, you have to be in the system for X amount of years, depending on when you sign that deal. So it was really, again, it's just a matter of like, okay, Amador and Yankel Fernandez were going to be the first, two guys that were going to lock up a spot. And, I don't know that we'll see them in 2024. Maybe if Amador is on the same kind of fast track that Ezequiel Tovar was. And again, I think seeing what Tovar was able to do this year gives you hope that like, hey, maybe they're going to do that with more guys. But I think it just is more that Tovar is the exception to the rule. How crazy is it, Skyler, that of all the hype surrounding Ezequiel Tovar this past year, he lived up to the hype and didn't even get a third place vote in the Rookie of the Year award ballot. And so that's how stacked of a class it was this year, right? And so Tovar, lived up to that hype, was great. So maybe you see Amador in the second half, especially if something gets freed up in the second base, third base area. Obviously, there's been some rumors swirling with Rogers and Ryan McMahon as possible trade chips. Fernandez, I think, might be a little bit further away. Jordan Beck has, I think, made a little bit more growth and didn't struggle quite as much at Hartford this past year. Juan Mejia was a guy who was great and for the Arizona Fall League, was one of the fall stars. Along with Benny Montgomery and Sterling Thompson. And so he's one of those guys that you say, all right, the organization you can tell likes him because they give him that opportunity. I think Angel Chavi was the one that was a little bit more surprising. Now, Stephen Rice, friend of everyone, not just friend of this show, friend of everybody's show. Great guy, pointed him out because Chavi had a really solid season as a closer in Fresno in 2022 and was one of those guys you say, okay, keep an eye on him, see what he does, and was okay. You might even say he wasn't okay, slightly better than what you would have expected out of him this year in Spokane and Hartford, but still was able to show enough in his age 20 season to say, hey, we need to protect this guy because he's a player another team is going to draft. That's another part of the mathematics in this. And there's so much that I don't know. And I'd love to be a fly on the wall because there is that system of, well, you don't want to lose a Grant Levine, second year in a row that he hasn't been protected on the 40-man roster. You say, oh, a lumbering first baseman with pop, but those kind of guys, grow on trees and you can get them in other systems. You saw the A's do that with Ryan Noda this past year in the Rule 5 draft. But you're okay if you lose a guy like that because you can replace him. You also have depth at first base. But those high wire arms, man, that's throwing that cheddar. Like those are the guys that can very easily get plucked. You saw that with Julian Fernandez, a few years ago in the Rule 5 draft. Unfortunately, nothing really came of his career, unfortunately, due to a lot of injuries. But Javi is the most interesting one. Both he and Mejia finished their years last year at Hartford. So, again, they are knocking on the door. I think you could see both of those guys, even though they were more of the surprises than the locks in Amador and Fernandez. I think it's probably even more likely that you might see a Mejia or Chavi debut at some point during the 2024 season.
Yeah, and especially when you're going through pitchers, they're always bullpen arms. Everything's kind of volatile, so you always need more arms. 2023 taught us anything. It's that you need more arms. And it's just cool to see there's all international guys, all international signings that have performed well. And they're still, in the grand scheme of things, still young. In age, experience, they've been in the system for a while, but now it's nice to see like 20, 21-year-old type guys knocking on that door. They're getting closer with a lot of those other guys in the system. So there's exciting players coming up through the system, or at least ones to be high on, to be really intrigued by. And it'd be nice to see some of them start to contribute, get closer to contributing, because that's what we noticed from a lot of those fun teams this past year. Like, it's fun to let the kids play. Orioles, Diamondbacks, good stuff.
Yeah, and I think the Rockies have definitely changed their approach with progressing players throughout the minor league system. I mean, again, very unfortunate about Gabriel Hughes needing the Tommy John surgery, but a guy who was just drafted last year was up in Double-A, right? He was starting playoff games late in 2022. So they're pushing these guys along a lot quicker. giving them those opportunities, and they're showing that they can do it. I don't think that was necessarily the case with a Hunter Goodman, where you say, by June, it seemed like he was maybe ready for the majors. And again, the Rockies see plenty of things that we don't. Whether you cover the team on a day-to-day basis or you're a fan, there's a lot going on behind the scenes. But I think, for the most part, they're given those opportunities for those young guys, and I think they recognize too right now that they are in a mode, and they are in a way with not being a contender. So they should be able to give more opportunities for those guys to figure out what they've got, because they've got a lot of depth. There's only a few guys that are really considered, top 100 prospects, or like can't miss, like Amador's 21st in the MLB pipeline rankings. So he's a guy you say, okay, he's a little bit more can't miss. After that, there are definitely question marks and guys need to prove themselves, but the Rockies should be able to give more opportunities to these young guys the next couple seasons.
Yeah, I like to see them become a more well-oiled machine, and just maybe a little bit more natural turnover, because that's kind of been the problem we've seen is things move up and then it just sort of gets log jammed and guys get stuck at a level for a whole season when maybe they could have gotten moved up, but there's just no room for them. Well-oiled machine, be good to see. And yeah, like you said, they're starting to do it, which is fun. Sterling Thompson, Jordan Beck, two guys that you already mentioned. They're ones that are quickly progressing through. And you're like, man, I want to see those guys now at some point. But yeah, 40-man protections, fun stuff. Roster's still in the shuffle. It's full right now, but they'll continue to shuffle it throughout the season, off-season, with other guys, DFA, outright trades, all that good stuff. But before we end out this segment, it was awards week this past week, so a bunch of awards handed out. But one the Rockies fans were really keeping an eye on was the Rookie of the Year voting. And just wondering, you already mentioned Ezequiel Tovar didn't even finish in that top 5, unfortunately, despite a very good season. He was our Affected by Altitude Rookie of the Year, just because Nolan Jones got everything else. For the sake of variety, we gave it to Tovey. But Nolan Jones finishing 4th in the Rookie of the Year voting, despite getting more overall votes than James Outman of the Dodgers, comes up in 4th, which still huge accomplishment. And I was really excited to see that for Nolan Jones.
Yeah, it was fantastic. The way, I think a lot of people nationally were able to recognize what he did this year. And, the system being in place as it is a good system. But in a year in which there was just so much depth for the rookies in the National League, I think in the American League as well, if you would have had a 5-player ballot, because for Rookie of the Year and Manager of the Year, you only go 3 deep. For Cy Young Award, you go 5, and MVP, you go 10. If there was a 5-player ballot, I think Nolan Jones would have finished 3rd. I think you would have seen, people probably having also do more homework. I think that's kind of the biggest key. And I think a lot of people going into the results probably anticipated the fact that obviously Carroll was going to take first. You figured it was going to be unanimous, but you never know, because Kodai Senga had a really, really good year. As it was, all 30 voters, including myself, voted Corbin Carroll first. Senga finished second, Outman third. Because again, Outman was there all season long. Can't argue with that. Sure, that does make sense. But if you're doing your homework and you're noticing what Nolan Jones was able to do at the end of the season, it was the final game, final hours of the 2023 MLB season, gets that 20th home run, gets that 20th stolen base, and you go, well, wait a minute, hold on. How many rookies have ever had a 2020 season? Only 16 ever in the history of baseball. And you look at what he was able to do over the final, 2.5 weeks of the season, from September 14th to the end of the year. According to Fangraphs WAR, Nolan Jones was the best player in baseball. Now, that in and of itself does not make him, a better candidate than Corbin Carroll, or even a better candidate than Kodai Senga. But taken in consideration with, the previous 4 months that he had played, you go, well, wait a minute, this guy has the highest OPS plus of all the qualified rookies, and the highest just OPS too. So that's why for me, I had Nolan Jones as number 2 on my Rookie of the Year award ballot, with Senga finishing 3rd. If I could have tied them for 2nd, I would have. The tiebreaker for me was ultimately the fact that only 16 players had a 2020 season as a rookie, and 18 rookies had ever struck out 200 batters like Kodai Senga. So said, oh, well, slightly more rare what Nolan Jones was able to do. So he gets my second place vote. There was a voter in Pittsburgh also that had Nolan Jones as a second place vote. So I think that was also more than James Outman. Jones was on 12 ballots ahead of Outman. Outman was ahead of Jones on 9 ballots. I think even if you listen to the Cespedes Family Barbecue guys, Jordan Schusterman, yeah, he had a vote, voted Yuri Perez third. And he said on that podcast that if he was going 4 deep, he would have had Nolan Jones there. So, yeah, and the system is what the system is, and finishing third or fourth isn't I think that huge of an issue or that huge of a discrepancy overall. But yeah, I think Nolan Jones did really well to, give some hope to Rockies fans that despite the fact that they lost 103 games, this was a lot more hopeful season than 2022. Where you're like, oh yeah, they only lost what was it, 94 games last year, but this was a lot more hopeful. And you say, hey, all right, a Rocky, got a vote in one of the end of the year award voting, because it didn't happen at all in 2021. That was only the third time in franchise history no one got a vote, even in the final, third place vote or 5th place Cy Young vote or a 10th place MVP vote. Only the third time in franchise history. Last year, Daniel Bard got a nice 10th place vote, I think, which was a surprise. Otherwise, 2022 also would have been a year with zero attention at the end of the year award voting. So Jones, first rookie to get votes since Herman Marquez and Kyle Freeland in 2017, and the highest Rockies rookie had placed in NL Rookie of the Year award voting, 4th since Trevor Story in 2016.
There you go. And it's how many Rockies fans do you think would be able to guess who the Rockies' only Rookie of the Year winner is?
None. No one. Well, first off, if you're doing that process, right, if we're having some kind of game show here, first thing they go, all right, let's see if I can narrow down some of the options. All right, it wasn't a pitcher. Okay, now where do I go from there? You're like, you're already out. Your first instinct was already out. Even if you were to look at the numbers, Jason Jennings in that season had an ERA higher than 4, which again at Coors is still saying something, and the rest of that class, was on the softer side, which I think helped. But still, none. I think that needs to be the new focus of the show. Maybe in addition to every Rockies ever, you have, do you know anything about the Rockies, and just have a bunch of different random fans on or people nationally and ask questions that, again, Rockies fans are going to listen in to hear, like, did you hear the Ken Rosenthal episode? He couldn't remember. He didn't know anything. He knows nothing about the golden thong from Jason Giambi. And there you go. And it takes off million downloads, a million views. You're right. No one knows.
They'd guess Todd Helton. No, he didn't get it. He didn't get it. Troy Tulowitzki, he should have, but he didn't.
Yeah.
All that stuff. Jordan Pacheco came in 5th or 6th his year. Crazy stuff. But yeah, Jason Jennings. I don't think many people would be able to guess that.
No.
That don't follow the Rockies.
Correct.
But it overall, it's good to see Nolan Jones for what he was able to do, in less time than a lot of those other rookies, able to be one of the top rookies of the season and really have that breakout year, and hopefully he can continue it on into the next year. And he was that instance of something I've always wished is you watch those teams that have a rookie come up and they're an immediate impact. And we got to see that this year with Tovar was a staple all season, but Nolan Jones coming in really having that big impact where he was changing games and on both sides of the ball. It's just good to see, and it's a reward to him. Yeah, it would have been nice to be top 3, but still top 4, top 5 is where a lot of us predicted he probably would finish, is at least top 5. Good to see him come out 4th.
And to make that jump too, because if you remember in spring training, there was far too much swing and miss and not enough impact in the bat, and that's the reason why he started the year down in AAA. And I don't think anyone would fault the Rockies for that. That was the right decision. It's probably one of the reasons why they had to go out and get Jerks and Profar on midnight of opening day, pretty much. but I think for some Rockies fans, they might be a little frustrated looking at it and saying, you had this guy on April 12th. You didn't give him a chance to play at all. There was obviously no plan for him to play, and he gets sent back down April 16th and basically continues what he was doing. Like he was showing everything that you saw through the month of May during the first 2-3 weeks of the minor league season. And I think that's a decent sized what if. Like if he had gotten that playing time and he had played like he did over the course of his final 4 months, the 106 games that he played, that if he had played that well over the rest of the season, I think there would be a lot more debate as to whether is it Corbin Carroll or is it Nolan Jones, because again, Jones is going to have closer to 90 RBI. Maybe he's got 30 stolen bases. Maybe he's got 30 home runs. And again, assuming that he keeps the same OPS plus, all that stuff, he now has 25 outfield assists. Outfield assists is one of those weird stats where it's great if you said it, but no one's talking about that. That's never been on the back of a baseball card to look and go, oh, did you know in this year he had 0 outfield assists for 5 years in a row, and then he had 10? No one talks about that. So I don't even know what the record is for outfield assists, but he's breaking that record right at the same pace that he was able to get his 19 in. All of a sudden, the conversation's a little bit different. Again, we do not live in that reality. We don't live in that multiverse, but that is a decent sized what if he would have stayed up and played on April 12th.
Someday we'll figure out how to enter the Rockies verse. We'll go mess around in the multiverse.
Are you sure you want to do that, Skyler? This one is already, well, maybe the other multiverses are better. Is that what you're kind of getting at?
At least more interesting. I'll go back and prevent some things from happening. Anyways, unfortunately, we don't have that technology, and we're making the most of this reality we live in. Woo!
That's right.
But that's going to do it here for this segment. We'll take one last break, and when we come back, really quickly, we'll talk a little bit about off-season targets, maybe some wish list, hot takes, but don't go anywhere. We'll be right back here for the conclusion of This Isn't Every Rocky Ever. This is Affected by Altitude, featuring Patrick Lyons. Welcome back here to Affected by Altitude. Before we wrap things up here on this episode, Patrick and I get to talk off-season wish list, predictions. There's still a lot of work to do. We've seen what the Rockies are, or what their goals are, but after all the non-tender deadline, there's an influx of free agents that have now entered the market that may be attracted to the Rockies otherwise. But what would your be ideal wish list or goals that you would have for the Rockies in this offseason? Any specific targets you'd want? We know we all want Shohei, but we have to be a little more realistic. But anything you would like to see happen or what you would do?
Shohei's dog. Just bring in Shohei's dog. We all get to pet Shohei. He's probably going to have to come by and pick the dog up once in a while, so we'll still be able to see him at the ballpark. Who says no to that deal? No, it's hard to know like wish list because, I sometimes think about things as in regards to creating a championship type team and creating a contender. And there's ultimately nothing that the Rockies, I think, can do this year to make them a contender. There may not be anything that they can do next year that makes them a contender. Again, everything that happens in 2024, 2025 is predicated on that. So a lot would need to change. So I think they need to give an opportunity to some of the young guys, which is hard, which could mean another 100 loss season. I think I've said this before. It's probably more likely that they would lose 100 games in 2024 than they would even be, say, 3 games out of the wild card spot in 2025. If you look at it to those maybe 2 extremes. So I think they just need to make sure they don't make any wrong moves. That's almost the wish list. I think that there is a chance that Bill Schmidt could do something big, or if it's something big, it might more likely be Dick Monfort kind of pulling the strings on that. I don't know. I certainly won't be Chris Bryant sized, but it could be something, a lot more significant. Last offseason, nothing really happened that much, right? They re-signed Jose Urena. The Nolan Jones deal turned out great, and they claimed Brent Suter in November. In December at the winter meetings, there's talk of Bellinger. There's talk, hey, maybe they'll acquire Brian Reynolds in a trade. They got Jeff Criswell for Chad Smith. They signed Pierce Johnson.
We got Cole Tucker.
Yeah, Cole Tucker, Connor Joe was traded in January. Nick Mears selected off waivers. Connor Siebold traded from the Red Sox. Harold Castro signs a minor league deal. Nothing in February, and then in March, oh crap, we're going to lose 100 games. Bring in Mike Moustakas, Brad Hand, Jerks, and Profar. Like, not a ton of things happened. Again, the Jones trade worked out really great. So I think, in a way, they've almost already outdone last offseason in, I think, the Cal Quantrill deal. Because it is a much more notable and established name to a degree. So I think they'll still add at least somebody else. And it's going to be late. It's going to be late in the offseason. I think there's still one more pitcher that they're probably going to add. We've been talking about it a little bit on the DNVR Rockies podcast. What it would take for some of these middle to lower tier guys. On one hand, if you look at Michael Lorenzen, which I believe you wrote about, really great article over on Purple Row. I will plug it for you. Great breakdown of what he's like. And you say, okay, well, he's still kind of new to starting pitching. So that gives you some hope that there's some projection there that he could take another step forward. Dude threw a no-hitter in his home debut in Philadelphia. But then was, demoted to the bullpen. We didn't see him very much in the postseason, only out of the pen. But he doesn't have a big starting pitching track record to say, well, we need you to eat up innings. That's kind of a big piece. Like, you would like a guy that, maybe can have a sub-4 ERA, but if he's only doing that over 18 starts, what is that doing to, the young guys that are getting shuffled back and forth? Between Albuquerque and the bigs. I think there's still a depth issue at AAA as far as their starting pitching is concerned. I do like Joe Rock. I do like, Case Williams. Andrew Quezada had a really solid season in 2023 with Hartford, but shuttling those guys back and forth again, they're going to get their feet wet, and I think that's a good opportunity for them. But still, I think you need those innings, and a lot of it's going to be predicated on, okay, here we are in February. We're about to send the trucks down to Scottsdale at Salt River Fields. Who's left over? Who needs a place and who needs a guaranteed deal? And then, maybe they'll be able to find someone, or again, they go that trade route and maybe they clean up, for lack of a better term, some of the glut that they have with their outfield prospects. If you've got Brenton Doyle locked and loaded in center field for a few more years playing, that really solid defense, and Nolan Jones is in left or right, you only got one more spot for either Jordan Beck or Yanquiel Fernandez. What does that mean about Sterling Thompson? Can he really play infield? What does that mean for Benny Montgomery? Is that hitch in his swing too much of an issue? Well, he still has the prospect shine. Is that a guy that you end up trading? And again, with some of those middle infield prospects, do you move Brendan Rodgers with 2 years left before he hits free agency? Do you move a controllable piece, 4 more years of Ryan McMahon? So those are the big questions. I can't say that I wish for any of those things to happen necessarily, but I do know that something again much more sizable than what we saw last offseason will happen this offseason.
Yeah, and I'm in that same boat. It'd be nice to get the big shiny free agents, but the most part it's kind of those more bargain bin, lower tier signings, and which they can work out. Chase Anderson was a pretty low claim off of waivers and turned in a pretty solid little year with the Rockies. Perhaps he comes back. But it's one thing that I recently wrote about is maybe you look at trading Elias Diaz. The catching market's kind of thin as well, and he's a good solid catcher on both sides of the ball. You can net something and snag one of those other catchers, a Tom Murphy for another year or so to kind of pair with Brian Servant or somebody for 2024 before Drew Romo's ready. There's options out there for the Rockies if they're willing to make them. And I think I like what you said is just kind of cleaning up some things you have. There's a jam in some spots, trade from areas of strength to boost that pitching. I think we're probably both in agreement. Just get some pitching. Figure out how you can replenish that pitching.
We can all use a third arm, and in the Rockies' case, 7, 8, 9 arms you need at least in the rotation.
The Rockies need to basically be a spider. Like, they need all those arms, a centipede even. A millipede worth of pitching arms. That's what we need.
I like it.
Yeah, if you had one hot take of somebody you would just love them to acquire, who would it be?
Gosh,
is the limit. Maybe not Ohtani, but somebody.
I can't just do that because I feel like it has to be realistic to a degree. There's two guys, one, and they both seem like good fits for as like guys you look back and you say, oh yeah, I kind of forgot he pitched with the Rockies late in his career. I think Wade Miley is a guy that you would like to bring in. I can remember talking about him 3-4 years ago as a candidate. That's a decent fit. And so this is probably more of a dream too, but wouldn't you love to see Zach Greinke pitch one season in Colorado? Skyler, wouldn't you love?
I wanted it this year. It would have been just the weirdest dude. I'm all for weird dudes being on the Rockies.
Bring in Zach Greinke, 1-year deal. Give him the Bud Black contract where at the end of the year, we're going to bring you back again. You're really good at age 42. Let's bring him back for age 43, whatever it is. Zach Greinke, come on. That would be fun.
Yeah. He would, if nothing else, it'd just be entertaining.
And I think he actually would pitch fairly well. Like I think he would like that challenge of pitching at Coors. So that would be great. That would probably be the top of my reasonable, but we all know it probably won't happen, wish list.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he could get his 3,000th career strikeout. That would be great.
And another,
give us something.
Who knows? Maybe he's the fourth Rocky in the Baseball Hall of Fame by that point. After, of course, Larry Walker, Jim Leland, and Todd Helton. Yeah, I said it. That's right. Todd Helton will be the third Rockies Hall of Famer in Cooperstown. Third.
Yeah. Oh man, it's so funny. Everybody forgets about Jim Leland. Oh man, I hope his plaque just has him smoking a heater.
Well, maybe there'll just be an ashtray actually next to his plaque.
The plaque is an ashtray.
Oh, you might want to trademark that. I don't know what the laws are. You have to send yourself something in the mail. If you say it on a podcast, do you trademark it? I know the guy who makes the plaque, Skyler. We will all be in touch. I will have to get a cut of that, but you've got an idea right there.
The commemorative Jim Leland Hall of Fame ashtray. There you go. It's just his mouth and he's yelling at an umpire.
That's it. You got something.
But that's going to do it here for this edition of Affected by Altitude. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us this time around. Where can the folks find you and keep up with you?
Well, on Twitter, of course, it's at Patrick D. Lyons. All my written content is over at thednvr.com.
Awesome. And be sure to always check out the DNVR Rockies podcast.
Yep.
Always doing episodes daily throughout the week. Lots of fun stuff over there. You guys have a fun time.
Tuesdays and Thursdays are my days. So there you go. If you just want to cherry pick and you're like, well, I listen to Affected by Altitude. I only have time for 2 more shows. Tuesday, Thursday, DNVR Rockies podcast for me.
There you go. Affected by Altitude Monday, DNVR Rockies on Tuesday, Thursday, and then every other week, sometimes every Rocky ever squeezed in on that Wednesday. We got a week's worth of shows there.
We got it. We've got it figured out, don't we, Skyler?
Hours of entertainment. Some good, some bad. But it's been awesome. Thank you so much, Patrick. We'll always have you on again whenever, and appreciate all that you do and all that expertise and knowledge that you share over on social media. Always tons of fun facts you can get from Patrick Lyons. He's always got something squared away. But that's going to do it here. Until next time, this has been Affected by Altitude. I'm Skyler. That's Patrick. Evan's not here, but he says farewell as well. But that'll do it here. Farewell! This has been Affected by Altitude, a Colorado Rockies podcast with Rocky Mountain Rooftop, a proud affiliate of the Fans First Sports Network. Catch new episodes every Monday on wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Be sure to follow us on YouTube as well for video versions of the show.